Welcome. In this lesson, we'll introduce the basic ideas of group theory. Group theory is often called the universal language of symmetry. In quantum physics, it helps organize the fundamental forces of nature. The Standard Model itself is built upon the symmetry groups SU3 times SU2 times U1. In cryptography, we rely on abstract algebraic structures. Modern security uses the complex geometry of elliptic curves, defined by cubic equations, to encrypt and secure our data. And in chemistry, it predicts how molecules behave. For example, consider the benzene ring. It possesses a specific hexagonal symmetry classified as D6H. Notice how this symmetry allows the molecule to rotate and map perfectly onto itself, explaining its remarkable stability. Historically, this theory was born from a specific and very difficult problem. The story begins with the brilliant and tragic genius Évariste Galois. We are all familiar with the quadratic formula, which gives us the precise roots for any equation of degree 2. But for centuries, mathematicians struggled with a harder question. Is there a similar master formula for equations of degree 5 or higher? This is the problem of solvability by radicals. Galois realized the answer lay not in the numbers themselves, but in the symmetry of the solutions. Consider the 5 roots of a quintic equation. He studied how these roots could be permuted, swapped around, without breaking the fundamental relationships between them. And with this idea, group theory was born. Let's make this concrete with a fundamental example, the cyclic group C3. Consider the rotational symmetries of an equilateral triangle. We have 3 distinct symmetry operations. First, R0. This is the identity operation. It leaves the triangle unchanged, also known as the identity. Second, R120, a rotation by 120 degrees. And third, R240, a rotation by 240 degrees. Crucially, these are not static shapes. They are operations, and they can be composed. Let's calculate the product, R120 times R0. Mathematically, this means we apply the rightmost operation first, followed by the left. Let's watch the triangle. First, we apply R0. Nothing changes. Next, we apply R120. The triangle rotates. The net result is simply a rotation by 120 degrees. This confirms that R0 behaves as the neutral element, changing nothing. We can map out every possible interaction in a grid, known as a Cayley table. Think of this as a multiplication table, but for symmetries. As we fill in the grid, we see the result of every binary operation. Notice the pattern. Every element appears exactly once in every row and every column. This table is not just a list of answers. It is the fingerprint of the group, completely characterizing the algebraic structure of the group. But what exactly defines a group? To answer that, we must first define an algebraic structure. Abstractly, this is simply a set M, together with a specified binary operation. Let's visualize how this works. Imagine our set M as a container. The operation acts like a machine. It takes 2 inputs from inside the set. Let's call them A and B. It combines these inputs to produce a single output, C. Mathematically, we say that C equals A times B. For this structure to be valid, 3 key properties must hold. First, it must be binary. It acts strictly on ordered pairs. Second, and most importantly, closure. The result C must remain inside the set M. It cannot fall outside. And third, it must be well-defined. Every pair of inputs must produce exactly one specific result. Let's look at the standard number sets we use every day. We have the natural numbers, the integers, the rational numbers, and the real numbers. Usually, operations like addition and multiplication behave nicely here. They are well-defined, and the sets are closed under these operations. However, we must be careful. Closure is not guaranteed for every subset. Consider the set of negative integers under multiplication. If we take -2 and multiply it by -3, the result is +6. 6 is not a negative integer, so we leave the set. Therefore, multiplication is not a binary operation on this set. Similarly, look at the set of irrational numbers under addition. If we take the irrational number 2 minus √2 and add it to √2, the irrational parts cancel out, and the result is 2. 2 is a rational number, so again, we leave the set. Closure fails. To officially be a group, a set G equipped with an operation must satisfy 4 fundamental axioms. First, closure. Combining any two elements A and B must produce a result that stays strictly inside the set. Second, associativity. The grouping of operations does not matter. Performing A times B, then C, is the same as A times B times C. Third, identity. There must exist a neutral element E, which changes nothing when applied to any element A. And fourth, inverse. Every element must have a unique partner that reverses its action, bringing us back to the identity. Recall our triangle rotations. Because that system satisfies all 4 of these rules, it is, by definition, a group. Let's test these axioms on a more deceptive example. Consider the set S, defined as the closed interval from 0 to 1. Our operation is the fractional part of the sum. This maps any number back into the intervals 0 to 1, so it seems well behaved at first glance. However, let's check the identity axiom. We are looking for a neutral element E, such that for any input A, the operation returns A unchanged. To prove this fails, we only need one counterexample. Let's test the boundary element, where A equals 1. If we apply our operation, 1 combined with E becomes the fractional part of 1 plus E. Here lies the problem. By strict definition, the fractional part of any real number x is always strictly less than 1. This implies that our result is strictly less than 1. But the identity axiom requires the result to return to the original value, which was exactly 1. This is a contradiction. Let's verify this visually. Here is our set S, shown in blue, which includes the endpoint 1. But look at the range of our operation, shown in red. Because it is a fractional part, it is an open interval. It approaches 1, but never touches it. There is an unreachable gap. Because the operation cannot return the value 1, the identity axiom fails. Therefore, this set is not a group. Groups are broadly classified by their size and structure. A group is called finite if it contains a finite number of elements. We call this count the order of the group, denoted by vertical bars around G. If a group has a finite or countably infinite number of elements, we classify it as discrete. Otherwise, if the elements form a continuum, it is called a continuous group. Let's visualize the difference. On the left, we have a finite group. Think of it as a bag of distinct, isolated points. Here we see elements A, B, C, and the identity E. In this specific case, the order of G is 4. Because these elements are separate and countable, this is a prime example of a discrete group. Now, compare this to the right side. Here we have a continuous group. Instead of isolated dots, we have a smooth, connected path. Watch the element G. Notice how it moves continuously along the structure, transitioning smoothly without any jumps or gaps. Because of this continuity, the number of elements here is uncountable. Therefore, the order of G is infinity. A group is called abelian if the result of the operation does not depend on the order of the elements. Mathematically, this means that for any elements A and B, A times B must equal B times A. To visualize this, let's look at the standard vector space R2 equipped with vector addition. We start at the origin. Let's add two vectors in the first order. First, we draw vector A. Then, starting from the tip of A, we add vector B. This path brings us to a specific point, A plus B. Now, let's try the reverse order. We go back to the origin, but this time we apply vector B first. From the tip of B, we add vector A. Look at the result. We arrive at the exact same destination. This geometric parallelogram rule confirms that vector addition is commutative. Therefore, R2 is an abelian group. Conversely, a group is called non-abelian if the commutative property does not hold. Mathematically, this means there exist at least two elements A and B such that A times B is not equal to B times A. Let's investigate this visually using the symmetries of a triangle. We will perform two operations, a rotation by 120 degrees and a vertical flip. However, the key is that we will apply them in opposite orders. On the left, we will rotate, then flip. On the right, we will flip, then rotate. Let's perform the first step. The left triangle rotates, while the right triangle flips. Now, the second step. The left triangle flips, while the right triangle rotates. Compare the final results. Look closely at the positions of the colored vertices. They are not in the same place. The outcome on the left is distinct from the outcome on the right. Therefore, rotation followed by flip is not equal to flip followed by rotation. Since changing the order of operations changes the result, the symmetry group of the triangle is non-abelian. Let's apply these abstract axioms to a concrete system. Example 1. The multiplicative group of non-zero real numbers. We denote this set as R star. It includes all real numbers except for 0. This exclusion is vital. If we included 0, the group would no longer satisfy the axioms because 0 has no multiplicative inverse. Division by 0 is undefined. Now, let's verify the axioms. First, the identity. Under multiplication, the neutral element is 1. Multiplying any number, say 5, by 1 leaves it unchanged. Second, the inverse. For every element A, there exists a reciprocal 1 over A. For instance, 4 times 1/4 returns us to the identity element, 1. And finally, associativity. The grouping of terms does not change the result. Whether we multiply 2 times 3 first or 3 times 4 first, the final product is always 24. Now, consider a different structure. Example 2, the additive group of integers. Here, the operation is addition. This fundamentally changes the identity element. It is no longer 1, but 0. Adding 0 to 7 leaves it as 7. Consequently, the definition of the inverse shifts. To get back to the identity, we add the negative of the number. Positive 5 plus negative 5 brings us back to the identity element, 0. And associativity, as always, holds true for standard addition. Pay close attention to the highlighted box. It is a common misconception that the identity is always 1. In group theory, the identity element is not universal. It always depends on the operation that defines the group. This group consists of all complex numbers with a modulus of 1. Geometrically, these are the points lying on the unit circle in the complex plane. The operation here is standard complex multiplication. Let's check our properties. First, identity. The number 1 lies on the circle. Multiplying by 1 changes nothing. Second, inverse. Every point z has an inverse, which is its complex conjugate. For example, the inverse of I is negative I. Multiplying them gives negative I squared, which is positive 1. The identity. And third, closure. When we multiply two complex numbers, their angles add up. Take a point at 30 degrees. Multiply it by itself. The angle doubles to 60 degrees. Since the magnitude remains 1, the result stays on the circle. This beautiful geometric property makes U of 1 a fundamental group in physics and mathematics. Thank you for watching.